construct was to enable marriages like that. In our society, it's different. So if we see it from that context, then maybe you could see it doesn't work because the social structures are not in place. So, yeah, so there's that perspective. I mean, that's how I would argue from that point of view. Yeah, yes.
Well, the only thing is that you said that on that society of people, if you go to the story, you will have the same things that when Ali wanted to take another wife when he has already married to Fatima. We have hadith from Prophet that banned him from that, and he got very upset of that. It seems such a thing that even he himself doesn't like such a thing. And I want to also ask people in this room that how many of you likes your father have too many other women? And how many of you, if someday have a girl, wanted him to be married to a woman, to a man with other women that is already married to other women? Just answer that in your heart. It's not about morality, it's about what's reality, what will work and
No, I disagree with that. I think what you have to understand is even our emotional reactions to these things are going to be products of who we are. Do you understand? For example, I came from a liberal humanist.
Not from a family. Then you're talking one day.
Let me respond. What's your name?
The other house.
What's your name?
Kayvan.
Kayvan, let me respond here. Now, what you have to understand is it is a moral issue. Is it right or is it wrong? So that's the point. To claim that families can't be brought up in that type of environment is totally incorrect, because it creates stronger bonds in family, because you have closer networks of brothers and sisters. You see, I even know people in London that they come from polygamous families. They have the closest relationships with their family. They're very close. Yeah. So that's your statement doesn't have a basis in reality. But to claim that it's wrong just because the way we feel it, well, how do you know what you feel is right? Because if you go and ask, for example, in Tibet, the Buddhists, in the Himalayan mountains, they used to have a practice where they used to get the baby girls and baby boys and dip them in freezing cold water. Are you going to say they're not loving human people? Buddhists are the most compassionate people in the world. They would not harm a fly. They can't even step on ants, some of them. They brush them aside on the street to walk, let alone a human being. But we would say that's barbaric. Why? Because we don't carry their philosophy. And the philosophy and your concepts of life changes your disposition. If you're liberal, then you're going to have a liberal outlook, because that's what you know, that's your conditioning. The Buddhists, they act like that. You know why? Because of karma. Because they say, if they don't survive the freezing cold water when they're just born, they're not going to survive the Himalayan winters. Do you see? So instead, I think the best way to connect with each other as human beings is not to just throw these judgments all the time, but see the underlying basis for why people do what they do. Do you see? So we may react to the Buddhists, that's barbaric, you need to be westernized, etc., etc. But they may come to us and say, well, you're barbaric. You kill at least 300,000 people every year. Abortion. Based upon this skewed view of personal freedom. Do you see the point? We could both have these arguments, but what is the underlying philosophy that dictates our tradition? That's what we should discuss. And from your perspective, you justified what I was saying, which is, let's dictate our morality on what we feel, our fellow feelings, social pressure. But my friend, social pressure is disastrous, because you've just justified killing 6 million Jews. Because that was social pressure in Nazi Germany. If we take social pressure as a foundation for what we feel, or social pressure as a foundation for our morality, then we should say we could never claim it's objectively morally wrong to kill 6 million Jews. I'm not going to take that type of morality. Next question. Yes, sir.
Then how come women can't have multiple wives like men? I know it has something to do with like the economy during that time.
No, it doesn't have, it just, the main thing is, right, is because they're not allowed. That's it. And what we say is, how do you know that's true? Because it came from the Quran. Well, how do you know the Quran's true? Oh, we've just spoken about that. Do you see? So it gives us like the foundational view on what's right and wrong. Now we could also see what kind of wisdoms there are. For example, how do you know what child is going to be from who? Do you see? You won't be able to trace the lineage of the child. Who's the father? So there are resulting wisdoms, but foundationally, it's because God said so. Do you see? It's just a very profound, simple logic. You just bring it straight back to the foundations. Now, practically, it doesn't happen anyway. There's a practical manifestation. Many men, they can't even handle half a wife, let alone a full wife.
on 4.
Sorry, say that
There's
again?
a limit on 4, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it said that when they know it's come to the time day of judgment, there's gonna be like tons of women and not as many men?
Well, even now there's
like
more women
30
than men.
women under 1 man.
Sorry?
Like the signs of the day of judgment. That
I don't know. I'm ignorant on that, but I do know that statistically there are generally more women than men in certain
So
countries.
that's what I'm saying.
So if soul's a social problem,
why put the limit on 4? Why not just have it as many as you want?
I don't know. Maybe there's some impracticalities to it, but the main reason is because God told us. Yeah.
Can I just add a point on the womanizer?
Yeah, stand
issue
up.
of the Prophet
Stand up
Muhammad?
though.
I mean, like it's
But stand
historic-
up though.
What?
Stand up. So people can hear you.
The point is that is historically fallacious to say that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was a womanizer. Because, okay, first of all, men generally got married like around like what, 15, 16, like earlier than that, right?
Yeah.
Prophet Muhammad got married at 25. That was very late.
Yeah.
If he was a womanizer, he'd be going around with women before that. He spent most of his time actually in a monogamous relationship with Khadija. So if he was going to be making exceptions for Fatima or whatnot, there's certain socio-political reasons behind that. You know, if he really wanted to have more women, you know, he would have spent his youth at his prime with other women too, right?
Yeah,
I mean, this was a patriarchic society. It doesn't work that Khadija didn't allow him or whatnot. This
Yeah,
was a
that's true.
patriarchic society. If he wanted to get more women, he would have. He spent most of his time with one wife. And another point, all the women that he got were from warring tribes.
Yeah.
All the women that he married. If he was a womanizer, he'd be getting women who were younger than him, much younger than him, beautiful, whatnot, right?
Yeah.
The majority, and I would actually argue that all of them, right? Except for one, the majority of them, they were all either widows, divorcees, women who were his own age, or
Yes.
women who were older than him. If he was a womanizer, right, he wouldn't be, right? And Aisha also, I would disagree. Historically, she wasn't 9. That's another point. And also, now, last point also, that when he conquered Mecca, when the Prophet Muhammad conquered Mecca, he lived for like 2-3 years. That was the height of his power. He could have gotten any woman he wanted to, as many as he wanted to. He did not remarry at all.
Yeah.
Only when the wars started did he start getting married to multiple women, right? And when the war stopped, he stopped getting married. So history itself counters that fallacious argument itself. So,
Very eloquently said, brother. That's very good. Any other questions?
sorry, I didn't mean to like take over or anything.
No, that's the whole
I hope
point.
you can forgive me, please.
If anyone has a better answer, if they don't say it, then I would even argue there's something wrong with them. If you have a better answer, you have to stand up and say it. Because this is the whole point today, for us to learn from each other. Okay, there's no monopoly on discussion and what is this? Like, my God, don't be silly, man. If anyone's shy like that, then that is shaitan. Yeah, that's Satan's whispering. If you have a better answer, stand up and let's engage. Let's engage. Yes, sister.
Can I not stand up? I can just raise my voice.
Oh, that's fine.
I was just going to say, like, there actually has been, I actually did a research, when I used to be in political science, I did a research on polygamous marriages. And actually there are many cases in different countries that aren't even, they're not even Islamic. They're not even Muslim. The families are not even Muslim.
Yep.
Polygamous. And their families get along just fine. So it's practically like it works out. You can't say that it doesn't work out because you haven't seen it. Just because you don't see something being legalized in society doesn't mean that it doesn't work. Also, there's in society today, there's people going around having multiple girlfriends and boyfriends at one time. And actually, Islam kind of it kind of
Formalizes it.
It kind of formalizes it and kind of controls.
It does.
It controls the feelings of the sexes.
With rights and duties.
Yeah, and so like instead of you just going around having multiple, you kind of have responsibilities and it becomes a marriage.
Yeah.
Instead of I'm just gonna ditch you or break up with you
Sure.
whenever you want. And then what if she has a baby or something? And, you know,
Yeah. That's a
so
good point.
it's very formalized. It's very under restricted conditions. Like during the Prophet's time, it used to be during like mostly war and for political reasons. It wasn't just okay, you know, just go around. It's actually highly recommended that you don't do it unless you can treat, you know, all of the
Justly.
4 or less women that you're married to equally.
Yep, that's true. That's just a very good point. Let's move on to different topics to get more engagement. Any different topic? Is it a different topic? No? Any different topic? Go yes, please.
Just a clarification question. You had said earlier that I wrote it down on a card too, but no Arab could challenge the Quran and non-Arab could challenge the Quran. I just wondered what you mean by that, challenge the Quran.
Challenge the Quran means that we could emulate or imitate its unique literary form.
To reproduce something like it? Is that what you mean?
That's what we mean. But when we say reproduce, what are we reproducing? We're reproducing something that makes it distinct from all other speeches. For example, from a unique literary form perspective, the Quran cannot be described as prose, it cannot be described as rhyme prose, or even poetry, because if you take, in Arabic poetry, there's around 16 metrical patterns called the al-bihar, and you can't take those templates of patterns, and the al-bihar are based upon syllables, right? The length of the syllables, yeah, rather than the accent, rather than the sound, and there's 2 differences. So it's metrical speech, 16 rhythmical patterns based upon syllabic rhythmical pattern. You can't put that as a template and superimpose it anywhere in the Quran. It just wouldn't match. Also, it's not normal speech. It's not mursal. It's normal, straightforward speech, because we know it ends with a rhyme. It has some kind of unique flow to it, etc. Is it rhyme prose? Well, it's not rhyme prose because the Quran doesn't have a distinct syllabic rhythmical pattern. Because rhyme prose is described, if you look at the works of Devin J. Stewart, you see that it's described as it has a syllabic metrical pattern, rhythmical pattern. For example, an accent rhythmical pattern. An accent rhythmical pattern is like nursery rhyme. Ba ba, black sheep, have you any wool? You see the accent, yeah? That's an accent rhythmical pattern, okay? So you can't superimpose that on the Quran either. Also, with normal rhyme prose, what you see in rhyme prose, you have one of its definitions that you have a concentrated use of rhetorical devices. The Quran surpasses any form of rhyme prose with regards to the number of its rhetorical devices. It's a very technical subject, but this is what we mean. You can't emulate its unique literary form. Some people say, oh, you can't emulate it, you see these things on the web and stuff like that, but they don't reproduce the same literary form. They can't. Because every time you express yourself in Arabic language, it's either going to be prose, rhyme prose, or metrical speech like poetry. You can't get away with that, but the Quran de-scopes this. This is why even Aubrey, one of the famous English translators of the Quran, he said the Quran is neither prose nor poetry, but a unique fusion of both. They couldn't describe what it is. Even David J. Stewart, who's the only English scholar that has discussed the literary form of the Quran with regards to prose and rhyme prose and metrical features, he even says, you can't even call the Quran rhyme prose, it's Quranic prose. That's what he calls it. So, we have very good reason to say that from a structural feature perspective, it's unique and hasn't been emulated. So that's when people say, oh, it's a subjective criteria. It's based upon how you feel. Oh, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore thou Romeo? Deny thy father, deny thy name. You could even make an Islamic version. Oh, Abdullah, Abdullah. Deny thy mother, yeah? Deny thy tribe. Yeah? So the point is, it's not how you feel, how you respond to the text emotionally. That's subjective, I agree. But it's based upon observable features. Does it end with a rhyme? Yes or no? Does it have monorhyme? Yes or no? Is it based on an accent rhythmical pattern? Yes or no? Is it based on a metrical rhythmical pattern? Based on syllables? Yes or no? So they're observable features, do you see? So it's not subjective criteria at all. That's one of the claims that people poll to the challenge of the Quran. It says, no, it's not subjective at all. It's based upon objective, observable literary and linguistic features. So if we go any further, we would probably lose everyone, including myself. Okay? Are you happy with that? Good, thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Just in regards to that, so who gets to decide whether the challenge has been met?
We do.
Like humanity as a whole?
people who know Arabic, and they should justify it. And we have a discussion. Happened before. Musaylima did it, Basa bin Bar did it, Al-Marri did it, who else? There's so many people throughout the generations that tried to change the Quran. And this is unique for sisters to understand. There's a woman scholar called Aisha Abdurrahman. She died in 1973, born in 1917. She was from Al-Azhar University, and she produced a book of the regards to the Quran that preserved the challenges of every generation and showed how they felt. So a woman in the Islamic tradition preserved the intellectual tradition of Islam. The motivational thing for the sisters. Not that they needed motivation, of course. Are you happy with that? Okay, good. Any other question? Should I take a written one when you think about one? Okay, that's the question's been asked. That's been asked. Let's see which one we should take from here. Okay, that's good question. Can our doubt and confusion about things within Islam concerning capital punishment, like punishment of the theft and polygamy, affect our belief whether Islam can be from divine or not? Okay, this is a simple thing. If we believe, or if someone has good reason to believe in the foundations of the Islamic worldview, namely the Quran, the prophetic traditions, etc., and they reject something that is clear from that tradition, it is philosophically tantamount, equivalent of rejecting the whole tradition itself. Now we have to be honest as human beings. You may not like the fact that in Islam we cut the hand of the thief, for example. Even the Quran mentions, don't let compassion overtake you. This is the right thing to do from a social perspective. You see, so even Allah is saying, I know you don't like this, yeah? But what we have to understand is when we view these things, we shouldn't view them in a Fox News narrative. What is the Fox News narrative? It is basically, you have a sister with a niqab, with a burqa, yeah? Now she has a sword, very sharp sword, right down her cloak. And she's waiting, like this. Yeah? You have a guy with a really big beard up to his navel, and he sees a poor Canadian dude running into one of the supermarkets to steal a cookie because he's hungry. He's running, right? He steals the cookie. The guy with the beard sees him and he uses his beard to trip him over. And after the sister with the burqa, she's like, yes. She gets the sword, she goes, Allahu Akbar, and cuts his hand. This is the caricature, the cartoon, that has been portrayed by Western media, specifically the Bill O'Reilly show. What an idiot. That guy's an idiot. Honestly, Fox News, these guys have a specific agenda. You could just tell. They have caricatured human beings, right? So the point is, do we view Islam from that perspective or not? Or do we view it from the perspective that our philosophy of crime and punishment is not based on a liberal narrative, based on specific individual freedoms, because we consider society to have rights as well. We also believe that the philosophy of crime and punishment in Islam is based upon the deterrent effect, which is in line with Western tradition. We had, for example, Professor Van der Ark from Fordham University. He used to be a proponent of suitably harsh punishments. He used to say things like, whatever deters them, whatever fears the most, deters the most. So you need suitably harsh punishments to deter people from doing something. Also, it's not based on jungle justice. The Prophet ﷺ didn't want anyone to have any punishments on them. He didn't, full stop. He said, go away. He said, I don't want to do this. But if you gave him all the criteria and all the conditions, then it was a divine right. Because it was part of protecting society. And some of the criteria with regards to thieves, you have to be above the age of puberty, you must have stolen it if it was in a hidden place, not public place, by the way. According to some scholars, it has to be over like 32 pounds, which is about what, $50. It has to be done by someone who's not hungry and poor. It has to be done by someone, according to some scholars, who know that you have to know that it's the wrong thing to do. So ignorance is an excuse for certain instances, right? Etc., etc. Also, the burdens of proof have to be so high. We don't follow the liberal tradition of beyond reasonable doubt. It's higher than that. It has to be. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith in the Prophet tradition, it's better to release 9 guilty people than inflict a punishment on 1 innocent. And also, the punishments don't sit on their own, they sit on values, that the society has to have certain values. Cohesive values in society.